Purple Plum. Do you remember anything
Yes.
about that?
Yes.
And do you remember that you have information involving the Purple Plum with regard to her interaction with men?
Yes.
And that interaction with men indicated that she was...
Objection, Judge. May.
May continue.
Ma'am, do you need your notes to refresh your recollection as to the incident at the Purple Plum?
Is this regarding, there were several interviews about the Purple Plum, so I'm not sure which interview you're referring to, Mr. Martinez.
I'm referring to the one involving whether or not the defendant was manipulated with men.
There was an interview with a waitress who said she was manipulative or was only nice to good-looking men.
How about the interview with the manager, Gary Brinkman? Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with it. I don't remember every detail of it. If you
All right,
like me
let me
to
go
look
ahead
at
and
that.
provide that to you then.
Sure.
Take a look at Exhibit 610. Please read it all, including the margins.
Sure.
I may have it back. You're done reviewing it, correct?
Yes, I am.
These notes are in your handwriting, correct?
Yes, they are.
And you completed them as part of your investigation in this case, correct?
I was taking notes on the interview, yes.
And this is what you did with regard to this investigation. You would look at collateral sources and you would take notes, correct?
Correct.
And you would use them, either then or later, as part of the evaluation. It's something you considered, right?
Yes,
And in this particular case, there was an individual, that was the manager of the Purple Plum, right?
correct.
And you talked to the defendant. She worked at the Purple Plum at some point, right?
Yes, she did.
And when she worked at the Purple Plum, there was this indication, or your investigation revealed, was that the defendant was manipulative towards men, right?
Objection, foundation. Timing.
Sustained.
Well, ma'am, what do your notes indicate that, well, do you want the date, ma'am? Take a look at the date on Exhibit 610, if that refreshes your recollection as to when this happened. I'll point it out to you.
Okay.
What date are we talking about where this manipulation occurred?
June 13th, 08.
And during this manipulation, it involved men, the defendant and men, correct?
Correct.
And specifically, it involved the defendant, her interaction with men, correct?
Correct.
And your investigation revealed that she would feign.
Objection, hearsay.
Approach, please.
And the part of the investigation that you found out was that the defendant was manipulative in her interaction with men, correct?
Objection.
Overruled. You may answer yes or
Correct.
no.
She was flirtatious with them. I don't know if she was manipulative with them. He says she used them.
All right. Using men, given your previous definition, that's someone who's manipulative, correct?
That would be correct.
And so, given that, isn't that something that it's something that you considered and ultimately rejected in favor of the defendant, right?
Actually, I looked at behavior after the homicide, and that was after the homicide,
Right.
that I would consider would be aberrant behavior, and according to her other history in working in restaurants, that was never part of it. And at working at Casa Ramos, that was not part of it, according to the owner. So I looked at behavior after the murder or after the killing, and I would say that unusual aberrant behavior would be part of that.
And that's your assessment, if you will, of her behavior, correct?
Yes,
And that's your assessment of her behavior, even though the indications are what they are as part of the investigation, correct?
the indications,
Vague.
Overruled.
the indications, they're contrary indications, with Casa Ramos differently than Purple Plum.
But my point is that you decided to disregard these indications that she was manipulative as part of your assessment in this, as part of your opinion in this case, right?
I didn't disregard them, I considered them.
You considered them, but chose to find them to not be of enough value to factor into your assessment, right?
I factored in behavior prior, her behavior toward men prior to the killing. I factored in her behavior with both restaurants. I factored them all in.
You've already told us that, but my question to you is more pointed. You came in here and you indicated that the defendant was manipulated by Mr. Alexander, correct?
Abused by Mr. Alexander.
All right, he was, and that has a component of manipulation, correct?
Yes, it would.
And in fact, in this particular case, what we have is the defendant exhibiting manipulative behavior after she killed him, right?
Correct.
And what you're saying is, even though she's exhibiting manipulative behavior, I'm not going to believe that manipulative behavior. That's what you're saying, right?
No, I'm not saying that.
So you
I'm
do
saying
believe-
I believe that she could have been manipulative with men at that time. I'm not disregarding that.
If she is manipulative with men, you would agree that Travis Alexander was a man, right?
I said she was.
Yes or no?
Her testimony as to when the supposed manipulation took place.
Overruled.
Yes or no? Was Mr. Alexander a man?
Yes, he was.
And you've just told us that she could be manipulative with men. You just told us that,
I
right?
said at this period of time, she was manipulative. And in Casa Ramos, which was during that period of time, the statements were that she wasn't. So I have no evidence prior to Mr. Alexander that she was manipulative with men. I just don't have that
What you're
evidence.
telling me is that somebody is telling you, according to you here, that there's no information on the left side, but on the right side, somebody's being very specific that she's manipulative, right? That's what you're telling us, right?
Objection mischaracterizes the testimony specific as to manipulation. There's no specificity.
Overruled. You
Right?
may-
That's what you're telling us. You have two competing views, according to you, right?
I have competing views
Yes or no?
after the killing.
Yes or no? You have two competing views. Casa Ramos on the left side, Purple Plum on the right side. You have two competing views, right?
Those two competing views.
And what you decided to do as part of this evaluation is tell me, well, I believed what people were saying at Casa Ramos, right?
No, I did not say that.
Well, you are disbelieving what people are saying at the Purple Plum, right?
I am also looking at,
Yes or no? Are you disbelieving what people are saying?
I have other information about what people said at the Purple Plum that I also took into account, Mr. Martinez.
And so what you're saying is that you're disbelieving what was said at the Purple Plum about her being manipulative. That's what you're telling me, right?
Even if I say I believe that she was manipulative at that time, it doesn't mean I believe as a characteristic that she is. I could believe that she was manipulative at that time. It does not, it's situational. It doesn't mean that I believe as a characteristic of Miss Arias that she's a manipulative person.
And what we know with regard to this assessment is that when she was younger, we have information from you that she was not abused and she liked to play the victim, right? You have that information, right?
You're
Sir, don't answer the question.
mischaracterizing.
Don't answer the question. I'm sorry. Repeat
The que-
objection.
The question is mischaracterizing the testimony.
Overruled. You may answer.
Right? You told us about that when she was younger, right? That you have that information, right?
I have one friend
Yes
saying
or
that.
no?
I have one friend,
Yes or no?
yes, one friend.
And then you're now telling us, and this is when she was younger, right? And now you have her immediately after the murder, 5 days after the murder, exhibiting manipulative behavior. Yes or no?
Yes,
So what you're saying, though, is at one, you have an expanse of years in between, right?
yes,
And what you're choosing to say is, well, even though there was this behavior here when she was younger, and there's the same behavior when she was older, you're choosing to say that was aberrant. That is not something that was a characteristic of hers. That's what you're saying, right?
I'm saying that what I hear from one teenage friend of hers is limited compared to what I heard from other sources in regard to Miss Arias. And so there is a preponderance of evidence on the one side and not on the other. That's what I'm saying.
Is that your standard that you use when evaluating this evidence, the preponderance of the evidence? Is that what you're using? One is more likely true than not? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that when I have numerous collateral sources. No.
I'm asking for your definition of preponderance of evidence.
And I'm going to tell you what it is.
My question is more pointed than that. Does it mean more likely than not?
No,
You're using it differently.
I am.
What's the standard, in one sentence, that preponderance of the evidence means to you?
For me, preponderance of evidence means that I have looked at all of the evidence that I have available to me, and I have gone through it and looked at what appears to be the truth. What for me makes sense, what for me, after I weigh all of the evidence, makes the most sense to me. And that's what I have to go on. What I have been presented with is what I have to go on.
And your definition of preponderance then is what appears to be the truth. That's what you just said in part, right?
In weighing the evidence.
Right. And so in a sense, what you're saying is you're a human lie detector, right? Because whatever may appear to be the truth to you may not appear to be the truth to somebody else, right?
I would not call myself a human lie detector. I think
Well,
that mischaracterizes me.
You evaluate this in terms of what appears to be the truth to you then, right? Right?
And that's the context of what I'm saying today.
And what appears to be the truth to you in this case, in terms of the purple plum and the Casa Ramos example, to you, the Casa Ramos example appears to be the truth. Yes or no?
I didn't say that.
Well, we were talking about it in the context of the purple plum. Didn't you tell us that that's what appeared to be the truth to you?
Mischaracterizes her testimony.
No.
You may answer.
I said that what they said at the purple plum could be true.
So she could be manipulative towards men at that point, right?
I said that
Yes or no?
situationally, it
Yeah.
appeared that could be true.
So
That
if
was
it's-
their perception.
So if it's true that she could be manipulative towards men on June 13th of 2008, it could also stand to reason that a week or 2 weeks before, let's just go with 2 weeks, 2 weeks before that, she could also be manipulative towards men, correct?
It doesn't stand to reason.
I'm sorry, the objection
Speculation.
overruled.
It
Correct.
doesn't stand to reason.
I know you're saying that this is your view of what you believe is the truth, but isn't it based on the continuum that we've established here? Young, right after the murder, isn't it also true that it could be true that she was manipulative before the murder?
Objection.
Because
Approach. may continue.
With regard to this issue of manipulation, it could be that we've seen 2 instances of manipulation here, correct?
Objection made, foundation.
Sustained, rephrase.
You told us about an incident that you investigated when she was a teenager, and you told us about an incident that you investigated on June 13th of 2008, correct?
Correct.
Prior to, those are incidents that can be characterized as manipulative, is what you told me, right?
Objection is characterized as an incident when she was a teenager. There's no incident.
Overruled.
Correct?
That wasn't an incident.
These statements that were made when she was a teenager, and somebody saying that she played the victim when she wasn't abused, could be characterized as manipulative, yes or no?
Objection is characterized as the evidence.
Overruled. You may answer.
Correct?
They could.
And you've already talked about the case involving the purple plum, and that could also be characterized as manipulative, correct?
Yes, it could.
Do you remember that we talked yesterday about a text message that was sent by the defendant to Mr. Alexander, and this text message was sent mistakenly? Do you remember that we talked about yesterday?
Yes,
It was to an individual named Stephen. Do you remember that?
yes,
And that as part of that text message being sent out, Mr. Alexander became upset, right? You
became
saw that
very
text.
upset.
Right. And then the defendant created another text message and sent it. And it was almost the same as the first one. Do you remember we discussed that?
Yes,
Could it be that this individual that is manipulative, given those 2 incidents, could have sent that text message just to get a rise out of Mr. Alexander and manipulate him into paying attention to her?
Are you asking me hypothetically if someone who is not known to be manipulative with other men that she's with and spent incredible amounts of time with, if she could do a manipulative behavior? Are you asking me if it's possible for her to do something?
Isn't it possible that that was manipulative also?
It's possible that most of us have done something
I'm not
manipulative.
asking about you. I'm not asking about me. I'm asking about her.
It's certainly possible.
And with regard to her going to visit Ryan Burns, you talked to her about that, right?
Yes,
And when she went to visit Mr. Burns, one of the things that happened was that they were involved in some sort of sexual contact. Do you know about that?
they were making out.
And during the time that they were making out, one of the things that the defendant, do you know why the defendant was making out so shortly after the killing? Do you remember what she told you about that?
I remember that she was trying to act normal.
She was trying, which is another form of manipulation, isn't it?
I think that's manipulating yourself. I think it's trying to make yourself feel normal in a situation that isn't.
Well, ma'am, if she has Mr. Burns laying down and she gets on top of him and straddles him, do you really think that she's trying to make herself feel normal, or do you think she's trying to make him feel normal?
Do I think?
Ma'am, we have evidence.
I don't know who I think she's trying to feel normal. I think I would want to feel normal, or anybody would want to feel normal after what happened.
So you're now injecting yourself into this. You're saying that your standards are that if you killed somebody, you would that same day go and have some sort of sexual relations with somebody else. That's the standard that you want to apply?
You know, I'm not saying that, Mr.
Well,
Martinez.
ma'am, isn't that what you said? If I were, didn't you just tell me that?
Let me rephrase that.
I'm not asking you to rephrase it. I'm asking you a question. Didn't you just say, if it were, or if it were me, something to that effect?
I think you probably know that the answer to that is, that is not my standard, no.
You don't, ma'am.
I don't go and
Ma'am,
behave.
we don't, you understand that your standards, personal standards, are unimportant here, correct?
Okay.
But you keep interjecting it by saying, if it were me. Do you agree then that by you saying if it were me, you are attempting to interject your standards here, right?
I misspoke.
When with regard to your standards, in fact, there was an issue that was created in this case because of your standards, wasn't there?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Do you remember that you told me in our interview that you didn't ask certain questions of the defendant because you were old-fashioned and you were embarrassed?
Oh, it's sexual questions?
Ma'am, isn't it true that you told me that you were old-fashioned, yes or no?
There were sexual questions I did not ask because they do not come easy to me to ask. Yes, that's true.
It was much more strong than that. You indicated that you were old-fashioned, yes or no?
Yeah, I'm old-fashioned.
And as because you were old-fashioned, that restricted you in asking the defendant certain questions involving the sexual aspect of hers and Mr. Alexander's relationship, right?
I read about them.
Ma'am, I know you want to tell me that you read about them, but isn't it true that
I-
you did not ask her about them, right?
I asked about them later, after I had spoken with you, after our interview in November. There was a sex tape. I did ask her questions.
I'm not asking about the sex tape, ma'am. I'm asking,
There were questions I did not ask that I had not asked when you and I had our interview, and there were questions I asked after that.
isn't it true that, first of all, you told me that you were old-fashioned, right?
Well,
Sustained.
After that, isn't it true that you are now telling us that you then went to talk to the defendant, right?
I asked her some questions.
You did go to talk to the defendant after our interview, right?
Correct.
You were still old-fashioned. You were even older when you went to talk to her, right?
Objection, argument.
Afterwards.
I was,
Well, your standard of being old-fashioned hadn't changed from the first time to the second time when you went to visit her, had it? Yes or no?
my standard changed because I was exposed to a lot of things that I needed to find out about.
So now you're saying that when you went back to talk to the defendant, you were no longer old-fashioned in your approach to this assessment in this case.
You haven't defined old-fashioned, and
Well, ma'am-
maybe you need to do that for me, or maybe I need to do that for you.
Ma'am, isn't it true that you were the person that used the word old-fashioned during our interview, correct?
Right, but I don't know that you understand what I mean by it.
Isn't it true, yes or no, that you were the person that used the term old-fashioned, correct?
Yes,
And isn't it true that during that time when you used that phrase old-fashioned, you indicated that you were inhibited in your questioning of the defendant?
I said I hadn't asked her if she used KY or not, or
Do you
who
wanna-
brought it, if that's what you're asking me. I did not specifically ask, did you bring KY or did you bring Astroglide? I did not do that.
Ma'am, isn't it true that that's not even, why don't we play it so that you can take a look at it, listen to it, okay?
Objection, objection. Name of approach.
Ma'am, one of the things that you indicated was that there was this issue about Astroglide or KY. Do you remember your response just now?
Yes.
Ma'am, isn't it true that when we were talking about this being old-fashioned, we weren't talking about that. We were talking about something else. And the answer is yes or no. Do you remember?
Objection, objection. May we approach? I can't do it without speaking.
Yes, may approach. may continue.
And you indicated that in conjunction with our conversation involving being old-fashioned, something about KY and Astroglide. You said something about that, right?
Yes.
Isn't it true that we were actually talking about something else? Do you remember, yes or no, that we were talking about something else?
No, I don't remember.
And isn't it true that we were talking about anal sex? Do you remember that now?
We were talking about anal sex.
No, I'm asking whether or not you remembered talking about anal sex in conjunction with the fact that you were old-fashioned.
I don't remember putting those together. I remember we talked about anal sex.
All right, well, let me go ahead and play the tape for you, and maybe that will refresh your recollection, okay?
Prior to it being played. I see that there's a transcript. I'm just
Yes, you may.
We are going to take one, this will only take approximately a minute, then we'll move on to another area.
Okay.
Did you ever discuss the sex with Miss Arias between her and Mr. McCartney?
She said they had normal sex, and that, and this is once again, I can't recall if it was Bobby Morris or Mr. McCartney, that they attempted anal sex once, but that it was, you know, they didn't like it. She didn't like it.
This attempt at anal sex, whether it was consummated, did you say it was consummated or not?
I didn't ask if it was consummated.
Okay, this anal sex, was it at her insistence or his request? Whether it's Mr. Juarez or Mr. McCartney?
I didn't ask.
Why not?
Oh, maybe I'm just old-fashioned, I don't know. I didn't ask because she said she didn't like it.
That was your voice on the tape, correct?
Correct,
And that's us talking about anal sex, right?
correct,
And that refreshes your recollection as to it, correct?
correct.
Time, please be back in the designated area at 1:30. 1:30. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice lunch. You are excused. You may step down. You may step down. You leave, or do you want to do it at 1?
At one, but Judge Ms. Arias would like to be present.
Okay. Deputy?
The judge is
We need Ms. Arias back at 1 o'clock. Thank you.